Well, we finally made it to the session we've all been waiting for. Here in Part 9 of the Zentangle Ocean Project, we'll begin to assemble our final drawing. Now this is where we take the pieces that we've learned in previous sessions, both the tangle patterns and the cartoon elements, and we combine them together to create our composition, our drawing scene. And in this case, the scene will be an imaginary coral reef. But just like a real coral reef, it's going to be full of all kinds of wondrous and fun things. So I'm really eager to get started and share that with you. I hope you are too, so let's jump right in. Now, just as with my previous alien and robot projects, this ocean project will be completed on two side-by-side Zentangle tiles. I've simply taped them together here on the back, and then we can draw on the front surface. Now, if you're using some other paper, you need to know roughly the size or proportions. This is 7 inches by 3.5 inches. So we'll start on our drawing surface or tiles here. We're going to go up about 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of the tile, and we're going to just draw a simple line across the entire surface. This is just an indication of the horizon line or the ocean floor, give us a visual perspective on where things are. Because this drawing will be so jam-packed, I'm also going to divide these tiles into half sections. So if you're not using a tile, if you're using an actual piece of paper, you'll draw a line here where the center is. So we've got 4 sections that'll just help us properly space the details here. So now the only other thing that I might suggest doing, depending on your drawing style and your skill level, is mapping out a little bit of where some of the primary foreground elements are going to be. Now I don't want to give away the prize, so to speak, but we're going to have an object sitting over here, so I'm doing a little circle there, and I'm going to use the treasure chest in my drawing. I've actually drawn a separate one with the Poseidon statue that I will show you later. But this one will have the treasure chest in it, so I just want to get an idea of where that might be sitting. Something like that with this other element here as well. And they don't have to be precisely sized, but it gives us a rough idea. And then here in the center, I'm going to have a few objects that I want to space. And this just helps us map out our composition a little bit. And then I'm also going to have some fan-shaped items going on in the background here. That'll take up some space. So it just helps me know where things are going to be. And then I'm also going to have something sitting right about there. The rest we'll fill in as we go, but this just helps us to make sure we're layering and drawing the things in front before we try to draw the things in back. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and grab our pens and begin the actual drawing process. So right here I'm going to start with one of our Seashimmer seashells. And it's going to sit right about here. So I'm going to just map that right into that area that I just created with my pencil, just to give me that positioning. But I'm going to just draw it in the same old natural way that we learned here earlier in the series. And let me just comment while we're drawing here, I'm not going to explain in great detail in this video how to draw the shapes, since that was covered in our previous videos, but we'll draw those shapes and you can reference them in the other videos if you need a little refresher on how they are to be drawn. But you'll of course be able to see me drawing here as well. Now right up here we're going to place some of those oysteroid shapes. And so I'm going to draw one here, and I'm going to use a slightly more perspectivized version of these, not quite the super 3D ones that I talked about in my examples. But I do want to have these maintain some sense of perspective, even though I'm using that shape. I just don't want to completely lose the illusion of things being in the front and behind one another. I think that really helps in a drawing like this, even though this is a more of a cartoony version and not necessarily a realistic. It's based on that reality, and so I want to do my best in a fun way to help you convey that. So I'm drawing one there, and then I'm going to draw another one that's kind of behind it here. All right, so there we've got a few of those oysteroid shapes. Behind here, we're going to draw one of the other shapes, like a big giant shell of sorts. So we're going to draw the Phicops shape, and I'm just drawing some lines out here. And remember, you can reference the other videos on the precise details if you'd like. And sometimes when I'm doing a final composition, I'll change it up just a little bit to help convey whatever essence of the drawing itself that I'm trying to capture. And so here, bring that around. So we're not seeing the bottom of this shape like we normally would because it's hidden behind those other shapes. And then coming right out of here, we're going to draw what's called coral seed. That's that shape that we learned as well. And it's going to be partially hidden by this shape in front of it. We're really going to be packing things in here because if you've ever seen pictures of a real coral reef, they are not sparsely populated. They are really jammed in together, and there's lots of different creatures and plants and so on. And now I want to draw another of these coral seed shapes a little bit larger and shifted a little bit to the left right here. So we're just seeing portions of this behind. And now over here we're going to draw, this is what I call a bonus item. This is something we didn't necessarily learn in the first go round. I'm going to zoom in here for you. Over here, right up against the edge of our paper and down sort of in the corner here, we're going to draw, and let me draw this with a pencil first to show you the shape. This is going to be a giant clam. So they're very simple shapes. They're amazing. If you've never seen images of them, you really got to log into Google sometime and take a look at some of the living ones. I mean, they are just absolutely incredible. Not only their size, but the brightness of what's inside when they're still alive and living creatures. Oh my goodness, it's really amazing. So I'm just creating a giant one sitting down here, and I'm even going to put, this is a little of our fictional portion, I'm going to put a giant black pearl inside there. Now giant clams actually do produce pearls. It's very rare, and they're perhaps the most valuable of all pearls, but we're going to assume this one is super valuable. Maybe it's based on Captain Jack Sparrow. He's got the black pearl in there, and we'll see. So we're going to draw that there. And while we're sketching with our pencil, let's also sketch in our treasure chest, if that's what you're going to use in your drawing. Now, if you prefer to use the Poseidon statue, then that would go in this same basic area. So you could do that. Now, you'd have to reference my video for that, and that's totally fine. I gave you both of those objects because they're both interesting, and you might find one is more fun. Maybe it's easier or harder to draw one or the other. So that's up to you how you'd like to do that. But for right now, I'm just sketching this in so I know my placement and where those details are going to be sitting. we're going to continue the same process, but we're just going to create the inked drawing. And you don't have to draw this shape if you don't want to. It's, like I said, kind of a bonus shape, meaning that we didn't learn it before, but it's just fun to add new things on the fly. And I was looking at some pictures the other night of these giant oysters, and it was just incredible. They're beautiful, beautiful things. And I'm going to draw a little bit of hatching here that will help us convey some shadow back inside the open shell. Now, if this were still a living oyster, there would be, this whole area here would be filled with the live creature in there. But I'm going to forego that in this instance and just convey this shape here. Alright, now we got our treasure chest. This will take us a few moments to draw this. So now what I want to do is create my coins and such. And when we fill it up in here, we'll create those little circles or semicircles or curves, and we'll ink in some areas here and there between them to make that impression of depth and shape. And where they pile up over a line you've already drawn, that's a great spot then for you to ink in and create some of that shadow. And I did want to do the pearls hanging over the side here like I did in the sample. Now, even though I drew some of my wood lines there, that's not a problem, because on a finished drawing we'll be able to add shading and use even a white gel pen to create some whiteness. It will just be opaque and go right over the top of those other lines, so it won't necessarily present a problem for us. Now down in front we want to add that same sort of pile of coins. Here I'm going to draw some lines that indicate the ocean floor, the sands. Just some gentle wavy lines. I'd like to do kind of those up and down little hills, because then when I shade, it gives me a little valley to shade darker and lighter and so on. Now, I don't want to go too far over this way yet, just because we're going to be adding some additional items there. So now we've got that. Let's zoom back out. And let's go over here on this side now. And we're going to put a few more things in the forefront. Here's where we want to do the Zenemones, or the sea anemone, Zentangle's version of that. So now that you see the spacing here, let's zoom in. And we're going to draw some of those anemone shapes. I'm going to use the freestyle shape just because it's going to give me a little more flexibility. I'm going to sort of move them backward in this direction so their bases are going to curve, because I want to add some sea sand and stuff here. I don't want to pack them in too tightly there, because then I won't have any room for that. We have to remember our sizing too. We don't want to get too huge with everything here because then we're going to diminish all of our space. I'm going to continue along here. I'm going to fill this in right up to the edge of my paper. And by drawing this item first, we were able to create the sense that it's being surrounded by these, or it's in the midst of all these little sea anemone shapes here. Draw some sand connecting here. And then I'm going to continue with my Zenemone shapes. And now behind this, but going up a little taller, I want to do some of the Quabog shape, which will help convey more density in this pattern here. Actually, I'll do one of these more stuck in there. And then here, it's just that Quabog shape that we did. And this will help create a little bit of a movement in this background. And like there's more density of these other shapes. Make one tuck in behind another now and then just for a more convincing layering effect. We have that. Now here I'm going to draw a little bit smaller one in the front. Again, gives me some more layers. And now right here, sort of going up and maybe around behind, we want to draw one of our coral silhouettes. So let's just do that together and see what we want it to be nestled in behind all these other shapes. So I'm going to create this. Kind of think about it as you go where you want those pieces to connect. Just like that. We've got a couple options here. We could ink this in just like our silhouette examples with complete black, and that's what we want. It's in that background. It's more of a less of a plant looking formation and more rock or hardened coral. But I want to suggest another option for you. So instead of inking it, just filling it in, use little squiggly marks where you're just squiggling all over. No pattern, just a continuous line of squiggles. And then we'll darken certain areas of this, and you can watch how I do this here in a moment, to create more of a sense of shape and dimension, and also by having those little bits of white space here and there, it will give the effect of the shimmering lights down there in the ocean, where everything's not either dark or light. It is, but there's a sense of movement because the water and the light that's reflecting through it and passing through it, as well as the shadows of things nearby and so on, has the effect of creating little shimmeringness to it. And so it's not, now it's hard to convey that in a static picture as opposed to, let's say, a video, but we can capture the essence of that by this very simple technique, and it adds a texture to our silhouette. It's not just a flat black piece of rock, so to speak, or coral, but it's something that has maybe little texture, little holes, little shapes, little indentations that are covering this coral, and we want to try to convey that. So now that we've squiggled that in, now here's where we darken it. Now I would suggest darkening it along the base for sure. And again, you don't have to do this in a perfect manner. Just add some darkness, some solidness. That's down where those shadows would be. So we're probably not going to see much down in there, right? The light's going to be completely evading us. So just along here, it also helps to distinguish between your different shapes in the foreground and in the background. So that's helpful. And once we get that darkness in, now let's just look at our picture and let's choose a side. Let's pick the left side and ink a darkness of each of these shapes along that left side. Maybe that's where the biggest shadow is, and maybe down in the corners here where it connects. And you'll start to see that this takes a shape. It starts to look like a piece of coral with differing dimensions and indentations and little pieces, and just leave some of those white spots. Now, if you see an area where, hey, that looks like it could be a little rocky spot or a little bend, then you can ink that in, like in between these shapes, kind of like this. Down now and then. And you'll see that it creates a neat little effect of giving this, it's still our silhouette, but it has that shimmering light and coral texture-like effect. Now, if you find, hey, that's kind of confusing and I don't quite know what I'm doing there, that's fine. Just ink it in like we did in our samples when we learned them earlier. Just ink it in as a silhouette, and that will work just as well. It's not that it's an inferior option. This is just a different way to do this if you want to have a little bit more realism and life in your drawing. So now we're filling that area in quite well. So now what we want to do, let's move over here a bit to the side. Now right up in here, from here to here, I want to add some more of the Quabog. So we start with our foreground stuff first. In fact, let's even add a few more Zenemones. Just have a few of those floating around through here as well. They make a nice pattern that works well here in the foreground. And it sort of ties this whole piece together here then as well. This is one continuous coral reef that we're looking at. And I might even do one additional layer back in here that I can intersperse and add some more crossover pieces. Just try to create an interesting pattern. It doesn't have to be a certain thing. Just some activity in that pattern, some movement left and right, back and forth, and so on. Now that we have that, now we're going to draw another piece of coral sitting kind of in here. Just tucked in behind these pieces and behind our treasure chest. So let's draw another piece of coral here. Let's see. I'm going to bring that in right in from here. And now you can ink it like we did the other one, or you can completely ink that in as a silhouette, but let's go ahead and do that. And just like before, you can ink the bottom portions where it disappears behind the other shapes. You can completely ink that in, so you get that nice contrast and can more easily see the shapes. But also it helps to convey that shadow, because the deeper, darker areas are going to be harder to see because there's less light down in there. So we're coming together really well. The only thing that we need to do here in the foreground yet is add some of our little wavy lines for our seafloor, the sand and so on. Just a gentle and simple pattern. That is a solid start to our coral reef here in our undersea ocean project, but we're going to stop or pause here and we'll continue in the next video where we'll finish it. We've got a lot of stuff yet to do in the upper portion, but I wanted to give you a little break and maybe give you some time to work on this or tweak it the way you'd like. But we've got plenty left to do, so I hope you'll tune in to the next video and see how we finish up this really fun ocean drawing. Until then, take care. Bye-bye now.